April 19th is Bicycle Day. And you know what? It has nothing to do with the environment, nothing to do with exercise. It has to do with taking a trip, a very special kind of trip. All right, let's go back in history. In 1938, working for the Sandoz pharmaceutical company, Dr. Albert Hofmann synthesized a drug called lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. It was an analog of compounds found in the ergot fungus, which had a history of reducing bleeding after childbirth. So the company was exploring potential uses of ergot compounds and their analogs, and that's what Hofmann made. But it turned out that LSD didn't have any therapeutic effect that was better than the ergot alkaloids. But in testing, it did show that animals given it started to get very active. Anyway, nothing was done with LSD until 5 years later. And Hoffman had been thinking about this activity in the animals. And he thought that maybe he would synthesize LSD again and give it more of a try. So he did. He synthesized it. And he went home that day, and all of a sudden he started to have visions. He didn't know what on earth this was. He thought maybe it had to do with contaminating his hands with LSD. He wasn't sure. So he went back to the lab. He took a dose of LSD on purpose. And very soon after, he started to see kind of wavy lines in the furniture that he was looking at. So he thought maybe it was time to go home. So he got on his bicycle and he headed home. And this bicycle trip was the first ever voluntary trip ever taken on LSD. When he got home, he had all kinds of hallucinations, visions of all kinds. A doctor was called, but within a couple of hours, everything disappeared and he was back to normal. Nevertheless, he thought that this required further experimentation, and he spent much of his career studying LSD. Eventually, he wrote a book about it, in which he called LSD his problem child, because indeed it was a problem. It was seized upon by the hippies and the beatniks, and they went on a lot of bad trips. Well, it turns out that LSD today is making somewhat of a comeback. In microdosing, taking very small amounts of it, it doesn't cause any hallucinations, but supposedly it makes people feel better, and they are trying this in people who are approaching the end of life, people who have cancer, and they are giving them small dose of LSD, and it makes their exit from life somewhat more pleasant. So this is why Bicycle Day is celebrated on April 19th, because that was the day in 1943 when Albert Hofmann had his famous bicycle trip that just coincided with the first ever LSD trip. So it is celebrated, and there are all kinds of artifacts also that are sold on that day, including this rather interesting design on a t-shirt, and it shows Albert Hofmann riding a bicycle high on LSD.